Every episode I ask opinions, and I ask these opinions specifically because I have one point of view or a couple of point of views and maybe a train of thought, and I always want and desire, sometimes comfortably, sometimes uncomfortably, to know uh, if there are contrary opinions to what I think, which I'm positive there are, but I also want to know if there are opinions that are similar and maybe even more fervent or more strong, specifically about a topic. This topic today came to me after observing many moments in life and observing friends, family, acquaintances, and other people that have come across my lifeline is teachers. Are they professionals or no? So I asked that question because I believe teachers or the act of teaching falls into a profession. But I think I'm specifically focusing on teachers in a K through 12 setting. Now, the definition for profession says to be a paid occupation, especially one that involves prolonged training and a formal qualification. And I think that's vague, but I saw another definition that I want to use that I think is pretty solid as well, where it says a profession is something a little more than a job. It's a career for someone that wants to be a part of a society who becomes competent in their chosen sector through training, maintains their skills through continual professional development, and commits to behaving ethically. And I think from there, then you say, well, what are the characteristics of a profession? And so the characteristics of a profession I see are great responsibility, accountability. It's based on specialized or theoretical knowledge. There's an institutional preparation. There's an autonomy. There you have clients instead of customers, and I think the denotation between those two words is pretty specific based on how we define those things. You have direct working relationships and you have ethical constraints. And then when you look at the types of professions that exist, some that are listed are clinical dietitians, professional athletes, lawyers, accountants, doctors, nurses, and pharmacists. And you can also add teachers or education as a profession. And I think the thing that's most interesting about it is the question of how are you compensated as a professional? Because when a person is a professional, there's an assumption that there is a significant compensation monetarily or some of some kind that makes the profession feel like the time and effort they used to become a professional, it feels recompensated for whatever they had to outlay for that. So we'll go into now the part two about what professionals are, and specifically if K through 12 teachers are professionals. Today's recording is with Matt Riggins, a former North Carolina teaching fellow and an alum of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. He brings 10 plus years of in-classroom teaching experience to the conversation, and he's also looking to bring a non-biased opinion on whether he believes that teachers in the K through 12 setting are professionals or no. Matt,
What's up, brother?
how's it going, sir?
I'm good, man. I think the world doesn't want my opinion, which is why it was so hard to get me to to get it downloaded to be able to start recording.
No, well, the interesting thing about it is that the whole name of my podcast is voice of my dot dot dot, bros, etc., etc. Because I feel like people have conversations all the time, and instead of taking it to social media, which is really easy to put the 2-second tweet out, to have this capability on your phone, and just go from there and have real conversations, kind of take social media to another level.
No, yeah, But yeah, no, I agree. It's easier, makes it a little more free flowing, and you know, it leaves for mistakes, which are kind of fun too, I think. So
That's the best part about a podcast. I did one earlier today with a guy who is a Marine vet, and he started a fitness company. And he actually told me how he failed and then restarted, and how what his mission is, and it's amazing. And I thought about like, yo, I need to talk to people about their things. And so this topic that I had in my mind about whether the teachers are professionals or no, right? Because you have to
right.
phrase it that way for modern people to understand. Because I think I evolve all the time. Like, it's funny. I don't know if you use the phrase millennial, but I think people make that. I'm pretty sure I am a millennial, but that people use the phrase, and I'm like, man, that's a really pretty diverse group of people. And then this blame stuff on them is really weird to me.
Sorry, it cut out on me right there.
Just saying, just like the whole phrase and how things get blamed on them is really amazing because they're the entire workforce almost.
Right. It's funny. I've got like a group chat with a bunch of buddies, and it's mostly political type stuff, but we talk about all the time about how, especially like older, like baby boomers are very quick to say, to shake their fists and tell us to get off their lawn and, we're all the bad stuff. But really, if there's a problem with a generation, it kind of comes from the generation before. Right now, at least that's the origin of it. Like, obviously at this point, those of us that are adults, we get to make our own choices. We can't blame it on others, but it's, we're born into the world we're born into. We don't necessarily get to shape its beginning, I guess is a way to word that.
No, I agree. The biggest thing that I've noticed as I've evolved with time, because I've gotten to live in a few different places, is I think the greatest attribute to quote unquote millennials are the fact that even though there is a complaint, their complaints are generally based in solution oriented conversation. Like, if X is a problem, then they're working on the problem, X sub one, to say that this is the solution for it, though. And I think that's the part where people ignore the solution part that they offer. Whereas, and I don't want to classify all boomers and stuff like that, but the public the public narrative is boomers say, oh, they're a problem because they complain so much. But I'm like, they're the ones who are creating solutions, like the apps that are being developed, monetary policy, which they don't have a ton, but they're changing the game with new technology, and they're finding solutions. So while you say, well, they're the problem, they're also creating the solutions for the problems they're complaining about. So it feels almost empty as a complaint from them. You know what I mean?
Right. And all these kids all expect a trophy. Like, yeah, I don't expect it, but like, you kept handing them to them.
Yeah, man. And it's funny you bring that point up. The guy I talked to today, Casey, was talking about something that was really specific, and the trophy culture is actually necessary if you think about it in the grander sense, because he said, and he went through basic training, I went through basic training. He said, you know what? People strive for those seminal moments of, I accomplished this, boom, what's next? And the issue with adults is once they hit age 22 to whatever they graduate from college, they don't have another seminal moment after that.
Yeah.
I mean, the next one is marriage, right? Or having a kid. And you're like, so I got to wait forever? And some of these things might not happen.
Right. And a lot of it's funny because, I talk to some friends sometimes the same thing. Like, those are accomplishments without being accomplishments, really.
Right. They're not accomplishments at all.
Like I told some of my seniors this year, I give them like a little, like, I'm the old guy, here's some life lessons, kind of but some real talk to them. And I told them, like, understand graduation is accomplishment, but if you let it be the greatest thing you've ever done, then you're probably a failure.
Yeah, dude. And here's the amazing thing, man. Like, I remember my first day teaching, because we started teaching at the same time.
Yeah.
And that first year was absolute garbage, man. Like, it was garbage. But it was garbage because it was learning systems and then still trying to be you and all that stuff. And that second year, and I don't know how your second year started, but my second year, when I knew what was coming, I literally took my whole summer planning stuff and I beat the hell out of myself just so I wouldn't have to feel that first year, I guess, unprepared feeling. And like my second year in general, because I still teach now, I felt like my greatest year ever because I felt like I accomplished stuff. You know what I mean? Because that year I also won like new teacher something because you had to be within your first 0 to I think third year, and I won a little award that year. But I was like, dude, like I needed that. I needed that validation, so to speak, to say, hey, what you did worked on a sort of systematic level, but it also obviously it worked in the classroom. But kids don't know how to like really give you that, hey, you did good,
No, they're like, hey, was that fun? Yeah. Like, especially because you had middle school, correct?
Yes.
And so they can't like it with me. Like this was actually my first year teaching seniors. I pretty much almost as a class, of course I've had like some individuals, but some of mine were pretty good about, I could get some feedback from them about like, they understood, was this effective? Not, did you like it? Because there was plenty of stuff they were like, I didn't really like doing that, but like I learned stuff. I'm like, okay. And so
right.
It's a different kind of feedback loop because like even like sophomores aren't exceptional at that.
Right. No, they're not, man. And I think one of the coolest things, and I actually haven't had the opportunity to teach seniors. I've taught 11th graders at the maximum, but I feel like teaching them is also sort of a pinnacle for teachers because they have a completely different mindset and mentality for what school is for them. So I think there's a little bit more gratification because there's a finalization with that group of kids too, that like it's terminal. Like kids don't ever have to go back to school after that.
Right. So they never have to learn ever again.
Right, by choice.
That's right. I did it.
By choice.
Yeah.
So the real quick, the conversations, because I put the podcast out there publicly. Introduce yourself and what you do, so it's clear that when we talk about this professional topic, the topic of being a professional, people understand where you're coming from.
Sure. So you want just okay.
However you want to.
Sure. All right. So yeah, my name's Matt Riggins. I'm a high school social studies teacher. I just completed my 12th year in the classroom. I also coach football and track and field. And so that's kind of my background. I didn't know that I wanted to be a teacher. But it worked out. That's kind of what I fell into, and I enjoy it. I plan on continuing. A lot of teachers are really kind of whiny about how hard the job is and all this stuff. Like I've never really experienced that. I've always enjoyed it, and the work. It could just be my perspective, but I don't think I work any harder or more or less hard than other maybe professionals. We'll get into that topic. And so that's kind of my perspective. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah,
that's great. And I think the really cool thing about you saying what you said is like your point about not knowing if you wanted to be a teacher. I remember when I met you all those years ago. It was interesting. My motivation for becoming a teacher was when I was in the military and I started coaching mixed soccer. It was boys and girls on the team, and I coached it with a soccer semi-pro. Like this guy used to play for one of the local teams because I was in England at the time, and he played for one of the local teams. And I just saw how he took his professional information and ideas and skill and turned it into a coach, and he had like a way with them. And in that moment, I was like, when I saw kids get better and better and better, I'm like, dude, what if I did this with like stuff I like,
Yeah.
And so that's when I was like, I definitely want to be a teacher. And it was never about money, but it was about the personal gratification. But at a certain point in time, it does become about money, because when you want those family, children stuff, at that point, then you're like, well, I kind of care about money now. And the point you made about the whininess, it's really weird. And I think that's the part that makes me question the professional part of teachers. Not to say other professionals don't whine, but it's I think the mechanism, because I don't know if this happens for you, but I in general didn't I don't know, enjoy hanging out with teachers a lot after hours, because they talked about kids all the time. And I felt like I was one of the guys where you leave work at work. How do you feel about that?
Okay, yeah, that's a very good. So I think it depends. I think there are. So I've just completed my first year. So I've only been at 2 schools. The first school that I was at was actually the high school I went to. And again, that wasn't the plan. It's just that's when a job came open. And I lucked into it. I was at a job fair, and I just happened. I didn't know the people at the booth from that school, but I just kind of asked them, "Hey, are these teachers still there? How are they doing? And how do you know these people?" I'm like, "Oh, I went to school there." And so it doesn't, I'd given them my college resume, right? And they're like, "Well, it doesn't say that on here." I'm like, "Well, why would it?" And so they jotted it down. That's me being 21 years old and not knowing, me just thinking like, "Hey, if I look good on paper, they're hiring me." Not, "Hey, who do you know?"
Right.
A little bit of realism to it. So I got the call, took the job, and then that was 2007. So I was fortunate because obviously next year everything kind of crashed, and it was tough sledding for a lot of people just graduating, getting jobs.
Right.
And so at both places, I'm still kind of, learning personalities. It's a slightly bigger school that I'm at now, so I still don't. I know everybody's kind of face and name, and that's about it. But I don't know them. And there's kind of this weird schism, I guess, where there are 2 groups. There's the group that you mentioned that's their life. They talk about like in their free time, like the kids and this happened and all this kind of stuff. And it's nice to like talk about your day, but only if it's something like sometimes I'll get home, my girlfriend, like, "How was your day?" "It's fine." And that's not me not wanting to talk, but it was an uneventful day. I went, I taught, I graded some stuff, I planned, but it wasn't anything like, there's not a story like worth sharing, and that's fine. Whereas I feel like the other group, they're like, "Oh, and this kid did this, and this kid did that." Like, that's not me. And so the people I hang out with that I do work with, unless it's something that's actually kind of a cool story that I would tell down the road, it probably doesn't get told. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'd rather talk about sports or the news or politics or anything else in the world. And I agree with you with the like leaving work at work. I try I really don't do much grading at home. I would rather like walk off the practice field and go back to my classroom and get work done and then go home.
Yes.
Because when I get in the, like, and I don't mind, I can't tell how many nights I've been the last dude in the building. Like, that doesn't bother me at all. I kind of get more done that way. Cause it's easy for me to feel like I get distracted pretty easily. And so if it's just me and they're working, I can kind of grind and get stuff done, which I enjoy. Like I went for my, National Board certification this past semester. And so I spent a lot of nights, leaving track practice and heading right back up to the building to write or to plan or, all kinds of ton stuff. No clue, I'll find out in December if I certified or not. So maybe, I don't know if it was wasted time. I feel like I don't know if it'll be financially worth it. I did get something out of it, so I wouldn't say it was wasted, but yeah, man, once I get in the car and I'm headed home, like that's home. Like that's,
right.
I don't want to.
It's your place of peace, and I think that matters. And you actually brought up something with the National Board certification that I'm gonna come back to, based on the professional thing. But I read the definition for a professional, and a professional is a person with like formal qualifications and prolonged training with a sort of a career status, and has like professional development and ethics, and there's sort of a competency training. And so I thought, well, what is my opinion? Are teachers professionals? Now, I separate teachers from like K through 12 teachers and university teachers. And you and I, we actually trained in undergrad to become teachers together. And then one of the things that I remember specifically, I think Dr. Hefner might have said it, but
probably
the lady is brilliant though. She was hard, but she was brilliant. And I mean hard in the sense like she was hardcore, but she said that most university teachers or professors are not trained teachers, so they actually don't know how to teach. And I was like, being a teacher,
That was Dr. Lanson.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, he also was an amazing teacher, and he was brilliant at it, though. And but he was right. Like the assessment was correct, but I would actually say that university teachers or professors are deemed more as a professional than a K through 12 teacher because of just societal standards. And so my answer is no, I don't think K through 12 teachers are considered professionals because of, long story short, they're given standards, which is nothing wrong with given standards. But then a lot of teachers, and you may know some, and I don't say a lot, but there's a significant number of teachers who just follow whatever's there and they mail it in and they collect a check, which I don't know if I would want to collect a check having to deal with discipline and just mailing it in a classroom all day. But that's my assessment. What do you think?
Yeah, it's societally, I would say, obviously, university professors are viewed more as professionals, and in my opinion, I think they, in a way, should be because there's definitely less of them, which means it's more difficult to become one. But it's also a totally different skill set because usually, not always, like if they're at bigger schools, they're usually there to research or to be an author. Right.
Right.
But they just have to teach because tuition pays the bills.
Right.
Whereas, K through 12 or possibly even at the community college level, I can't speak a ton to that. Like people tend to get into it because they want to, kind of the stuff you alluded to earlier, you want to be able to like, hey, I showed this person how to do this and now they can do it. And I think that's pretty cool.
Right. And, another assessment I took was the reason I have that assessment about K through 12 teachers is they, in general, don't produce anything from the sort of ingredients they're given in the sense of producing something for consumption. So your point about university professors, they do research and normally they create books or they have something published, but K through 12 teachers tend to not do that unless you've been in there for a long time and then a textbook company asks you to like contribute. And so I think that's why I don't think they're deemed as professionals because they don't produce anything for the masses to consume. Like they don't produce the book that teaches the student, whereas the university teacher helps in some way, or normally it is their book that the university student is following.
Line those pockets. Yeah, no, I think that's actually a very good point as far as being a producer more than a professors, I guess, in that vein are producers, whereas K-12 are almost like a middleman.
Right. But not to cut you off, but I think K through 12 teachers can produce. So I'll let you finish now.
Yeah, no, they can. But it's not, if they don't, they're not, it's not that publish or perish kind of mindset that a lot of professors might have. But I guess the counter to that is, well, then like actors aren't professionals because they're just acting out someone else's, like who produces there? Was it the writer? Is it the director? Is it, you know what I mean? So it's, man, that is a good point. I really like that. And I guess it comes down to the closest thing we have, K-12 teachers that we produce in general is just that if we think of a new way to present a lesson. But even then that, unless you're trying to get that out to other teachers or to share it with them, I mean, it's on a very small level.
Right. And I like your point about actors because immediately when you thought of that, you said that if you think about the societal standards, when actors have opinions about public discourse of some kind, though, if they're just generally seen as actors, people don't see value in it. Oh, you're just an actor, do what you do. And athletes kind of run into the same thing. But if you run into an actor who writes, directs, and produces, they're held to a different standard because they seem to be a master and they are creating. Like, for instance, if you had to compare, I don't know, Denzel Washington, who actually does all of this sort of things, as opposed to, I don't know, some, I'm trying to think of another actor, but just another actor who's a quality actor, but you don't know them for producing anything at all. it changes it. But if you look, the actors who stay around, they actually end up becoming producers at some point.
Yeah, and I don't know if is that a money thing or is that just them wanting to try something different, right? I don't know.
I think it's both. I think there's a money thing, and I think they see that I haven't produced anything. I'm just reading lines. You know?
Yeah. Man, man, I feel like Archer. I had something for this. Yeah, I don't know. It's at what point does someone get credit? Because there's only so many, like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? And with us, with the standards we're given, a lot of times it's here's a here's the information you need to get across, like, get it to them. And so it's in a lot of ways the job itself somewhat stifles that creativity. Like, it's in that, but I guess that's almost any job, right? Unless you get to just create whatever you want from scratch, like someone like a musician or a filmmaker or something like that, where you really have a totally blank canvas and can go do whatever you want. Whereas with us, they say, hey, here's what we as a government or a private school or have deemed important, and it's your job to make sure these kids get this stuff.
And it's interesting.
Be it skill-based or information-based, either or, because those are to me two very different things.
Right. And so, like, there was just a short list of what professions were seen as professionals or had to contain professionals. They had dietitians, athletes, lawyers, doctors, accountants, nurses, pharmacists. And in general, those people, like for a dietitian, they come up with plans and they can play around, so I can see them creating diets, right? And an athlete, I can see an athlete creating a new way to execute something. But lawyers in general, I feel like lawyers just kind of follow what's there, and they just try to find a way to find success within the parameters that exist. And like accountants, they do things with numbers, And doctors, I think is the most significant one, because they're probably seen as the most sort of like the epitome of professionals. And a lot of them, many of them, are just practitioners who just kind of go through what's there. Now, they do have to do research, but I feel like on a different level, if you're talking about like a general physician, I don't see them as sort of innovative.
No, because they're usually it's almost a flow chart, right? If this, then this. If these are your symptoms, take this medicine.
Right.
And so it's not, and that's a good point too. But you're not, if you asked, if you Family Feuded it and surveyed 100 people on the street, are doctors professionals? You might just get one or two, like, people being sarcastic and saying no, but like, it's almost exclusively yes, right? And people they're not thinking twice about it.
Right. So I think the definition goes with the societal norm and the respect level. And I think that's the issue with teachers, where the respect level is not there. So the tag of being a professional is absent. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a couple gaps with the respect thing. So one, there's a huge gap between the respect that teachers get and the respect that and a lot of, obviously, I'm speaking very broadly here, that a lot of teachers think they should get simply because they have that title.
Right.
And I think you get a lot of that, and it's odd in the classroom. I think you get a lot of that from younger teachers that say, well, I'm the teacher, I should be, but you have to earn it from the kids. Whereas the older teachers usually can handle a classroom, but they're upset at the amount that they do or don't receive from society. Whereas societally, there's a big gap from what they say, hey, we respect teachers, versus actually what they do.
Right. And so that actually goes to my next point of compensation, because the list of people that I put, if we compared the compensation that a teacher gets compared to a dietitian, an athlete, lawyer, accountant, doctors, it's really different. And then people will say, well, it's public money, but doctors are generally paid. There's public money out there paying doctors, accountants, and so I look at that and I'm like, what's really the excuse of the compensation discrepancy between professionals? outside of the fact that the value that they hold for it.
Yeah, and it's tough too because it's public money. We don't generate a product that we can charge for, right? Short of a a private education, which opinions will vary, but to me, most private schools that I've or teachers I've met or people that the private schools offer networking, which is the one thing public schools can't compete with
At all. Yeah.
Right. But other than that, the product is it's McDonald's and Burger King, right? You might prefer one over the other, but it's basically you're getting pretty much the same thing. Right.
Right.
And so, yeah, and I think that's one of the big things with compensation. The other one is that another one, you meet anyone in the public and say, hey, should teachers be paid more? Yes. Awesome. How about another 5 cents per 100 on your property tax? Slow down. Right. So there's a lot of those gaps too that people say a should versus, when it comes time to paying for it, they go, you know what, maybe they do all right. But that's with anything. That's Social Security, that's Medicare, that's the police, that's in any public good that people have to pay out that they don't feel they're directly benefiting from, that they tend to kind of balk at any kind of cost increase, which I get. I've kind of diverted from your question. Ask it again.
No, you answered it because it's about the compensation, and I think that matters because it's interesting because if we talk about public money, a perfect example is recently I saw like LSU did a reveal on their new locker room, and they spent like 2 million, 20 million. It was a lot of millions, right? And and then there was some athletes who sort of retweeted or commented is like, oh, but I have to beg for socks. Or I think Jay Billis said something along the lines of who happens to be a lawyer as well as he used to be a professional athlete. He's like, but they can't pay students. And it's interesting because that question in itself, the compensation, is interesting because I think people pay who they want to pay. Because, for instance, I don't know if you've ever seen this map, but I've looked at the map and the highest paid public employee, quote unquote, of the state is always a football coach. It's some kind of athletic coach in the state.
Yeah. And there's, the argument on the side of like free markets and whatnot there, which is ironic because they're government employees. There aren't, those people make that money because they do directly or indirectly generate funds, because if they're successful at what they do, people pack stadiums and they can raise ticket prices and all that kind of stuff. Whereas nobody is gonna, if I sell tickets to one of my lectures, I'm going to be talking to crickets, right? You know what I mean? So yeah, correct. People pay who they want to pay. And also it's with teachers, it's difficult to directly measure fairly how effective a teacher is, right?
Right.
Because, you ask anybody who's your favorite teacher, they're going to think back and it's not going to be, they're going to base it on like, oh, I got along with this teacher, or I enjoyed their class, or yeah, I actually did learn something in there. But if you ask them who was your most effective teacher, they're going to struggle to answer that question. Probably.
Right.
Right. Because school is one of those things, since everyone gets an education here, everyone's an expert. Right. And
so to speak.
Well, in their opinion, yeah, they get it. They know what it's like. And the other thing too is that, to be completely honest, like to be an average teacher is not hard.
No, it's not. It's really not.
And so and because we, even in North Carolina where I'm at, we're a non-union state, but it's still our salaries are, for lack of a better term, collectively bargained.
Right.
Right. And so even if I think I ran into that frustration probably about 4 or 5 years in, where I really, you kind of talk like you got the award early on in your career. And like, I don't think I ever felt like I was a bad teacher, because I usually, when I would get I'll brag a little here. I'd say it's a humble brag, but I know what it is. Like when test scores would come back, like when we're measured at like our end of state, like our end of course tests, by the state, like one of the guys that I taught with my first year who'd been teaching 20 plus years, he was like, and the kids are measured, level 1, 2, 3, and 4, and like 3 and 4 being basically, competent or better.
Right.
He's like, so how'd you, he's like, what'd you do like level 3 and 4? And I don't remember what the number was, but it was somewhere like, I was like, oh, it's like 71%. He's like, oh, that's awesome. Like, how did your standard level kids do? And I was like, that was my standard level kids. He was like, what? Said, yeah. He's like, what about your honors? And I was like, they were at 100%, like they're honors kids. And it blew
They're
his
supposed
mind.
to be.
Yeah, but it blew his mind because apparently that wasn't the norm.
I agree. I have a similar experience, so I understand.
Yeah, and so that to me, I was like, okay, that's very odd, but okay. And so I guess I've always felt like I was at least kind of good at it, which was cool. Like, which in itself is when you hear kids, like you said, when kids tell you like, hey, I enjoyed your class, or like, I was able to use that. I had a former student, it's probably been about a year or two so now, like shot me a DM on Instagram of some notes that she was taking. And she was like, and it was like the way that she took notes. She was like, I still use this because this is how you taught us how to take notes. And it's been super helpful. Thank you. Like, that's cool. It doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't prove that I'm effective, but it's cool. And so,
right.
And so, as I got a couple years in, I started to get a little frustrated at, when I saw some of like my other friends that went to college, like I'm seeing them like, like the keeping up with the Joneses, right? The houses they're buying, the cars they're buying,
right?
Like, or even if we talk about like, because obviously my compensation is no secret. You can Google it and there it is, right?
Yep. Right.
Yes. Which I don't have a ton of shame. It doesn't bother me at all that somebody knows what I make. I don't care. Because it doesn't change my day to day, whether they do or not.
Not at all.
But that's the frustrating part is I was like, I could really show up every day and legitimately just phone it in.
And people do that.
Oh my God, do they ever? And it's frustrating because you say, and people are like, well, they should pay teachers more. And I said, some of us, yeah. But it's hard because like in a lot of other, what we would consider professions, not all, but a lot, your compensation is tied to your performance. At least
right.
in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
Whereas ours is, how long have you been doing the job?
Yes.
And it was really frustrating to see people who had been, 25, 30 years on the job and just, in my opinion, just flat out suck at it. And I'm knowing that they're pulling home, they're taking home probably $1,500 more bucks a month than I am.
And they're just phoning in.
Yeah, and and it's all their kid, and I know that they're not good at it because I can tell the difference in students that had other teachers who were good versus them when they come to my class.
Exactly.
And it's so to me, in the as far as compensation is concerned, teachers are not professionals, not even
right.
close.
Right, and so
it's not about the dollar. And it's not about the dollar amount. So much as the way the dollar amount is reached.
Yes, that I was going to go there. But yes, that makes total sense.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think of a good example. It's hard because I'm like, let me think of another low paid profession. And that's hard to, nurses, depending on what you do, like nurses don't make a ton more than teachers at first. Their ceilings are higher.
Yes.
For sure. But it's, and they've got a hard job. And now that being said, yeah, I think nurses are in the same boat as teachers and I would catch flack from this, but they're a little whiny too, at least on like social media.
Well, and in addition to that, not to cut you off, is because they're also seen as kind of underlings for doctors, where they just kind of do the things doctors don't want to do. So in general, people don't really have the same level of respect for nurses either. Because I think there's like 4 or 5 levels of nurses. So
there's so many.
So
I don't know them all.
So it gets generalized, and so people are like, "Oh, well, you're a nurse," and you don't know. Are you a nurse practitioner? Are you an LPN? RN? Like, there's levels, so that makes it a little more difficult as well.
Correct. Well, and the same thing with somebody says, "I'm a teacher." Oh, what? Oh, pre-K. And to me, and maybe this is me. First of all, I couldn't do that job.
No, me either.
I'm just not wired that way. I don't have that kind of, like, I love my kids, but I can't, like, I'm not that nurturer. And so when I hear them say, oh, I'm a teacher, I'll go, and they say pre-K, my brain kind of triggers. I'm like, are you though? And I don't know if that's, and see, now to be in their defense, I don't know what they do on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
I know that I couldn't tolerate it, but well, I guess that's not true. For the right price, I could do any job. Right.
Right.
Which that's welcome to America. And so I think, but then, like, it could be a college professor. I'm like, oh, I'm a teacher. And that, a college professor would be like, okay. And I mean, they're entitled to that. That's fine, because I bet a lot of teachers they make suck, or that they've met suck.
Right. Yes. And so, but one of my points for how because again, so I want to be solution oriented, and I've thought of this and just banged my head against the wall. I've thought of for-profit schools, because that's the only way people actually see value in you, is if you produce something. Because you mentioned that earlier, you don't really produce a thing. And I'm like, well, I think that's the key, is producing a thing. For instance, you being a coach, because I coached in school as well. The coaches are actually, in my opinion, valued a little more than the normal teacher. So if you're a coach and you teach, they see you on a different level as opposed to just being a teacher. And so the coaches produce something. Like, for instance, I worked at Mallard Creek, and Coach Palmieri, who's had a great deal of success at the school since he's been there since it opened. And
he's
the
done
guys,
all right, yeah.
he's won state titles. He's nurtured guys so they could be NFL ready. Like, he's done what he needed to do. And I would say Coach Palmieri is probably valued a little more than the rest of the teachers, but he gets paid kind of the same. I mean, he gets a coach's stipend, but he gets paid the same. But I think their fear, or his power play, is that if he leaves, so does that program, so to speak. For instance, his assistant coach, Coach Brand, went over to Vance.
I was going to reference him. Now, are you familiar with where Aaron is now?
He's in Irmo, and he actually, I took a graduate class with the principal at Irmo. And so I was into the loop with all that, but like Brand really took it because he was his offensive coordinator. And he was there. Brand was there when like Mallard Creek was destroying people. Like, I mean, they beat people, but they was destroying people with him. And they put a couple of guys. They had like NFL quarterback caliber guys there, and definitely D1 if not NFL. And now he's in South Carolina, and it's interesting because South Carolina football there and North Carolina is a bit different from what I've seen. So I think that's a huge thing to see him go from Mallard Creek to Vance to Irmo, and that shows the mobility. But that's, in my opinion, because he was a good football coach.
That's exactly. And now
his teaching is like, well, you don't know. Like, is he a good? Because I think Brand coached, either he coached PE or he was a social studies teacher. I'm not sure. I can't remember. Well, I know Palmieri was a PE teacher. But like at that point, they find a position.
Wheel, it's those two, right? It's social studies and PE, just almost exclusively. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting because anytime you can say, so I've doubled my salary. Oh, you took a new job? No, I crossed the state line. I'm doing the exact same thing.
Right. Exactly.
Now he's the AD. He's the athletic director at Irmo, which is a little different.
But most football coaches become ADs too. In South Carolina, for sure, I know that.
Yeah, and it's not because they want to do the paperwork. It's because and down there, and it varies, like county to county, state to state. If I'm not mistaken, it's possible that I am. If I'm not mistaken, he's not teaching any classes in South Carolina.
Yeah, if you're AD, I don't think you have to teach.
Correct. Whereas like the county I used to be in, the county I'm in now, that ADs at least teach like one class per semester, and it's usually PE, and it's but it's a stipend based thing too, but it's anytime you can do the exact same job and double your salary, like why wouldn't you?
Exactly.
And Coach Brand, he left the really like teaching wise, Charlotte Mecklenburg they've got either the highest or second highest like local supplement in the state.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of people, even though they don't necessarily love Mecklenburg County, like we've got some mutual friends that teach there, and they still teach there, so I guess they like it enough. But they're like, their local stipend is double what I get.
Yeah, well, I
Or
went from
almost double.
Gaston County to Mecklenburg County and saw and felt the change.
Right. So there, like, I went from Union to Cabarrus, and it's basically, I moved a little north. It's basically the same county, and there's a lot of comparable stuff, which is cool. And I don't know, like the stories I've heard from Mecklenburg, I feel like you potentially lose some autonomy, which
You do, yeah, you do.
and for me, I don't know if I could give that up, because I've always known autonomy.
Right, it's difficult
in my classroom. Well, almost not exclusive autonomy. Like, they might say, hey, here's a benchmark test. You got to give 3 of these a semester. Okay. But other than that, I can do what I want. Yeah, cool. And there's value in that. And now that is one thing that's kind of nice, that really teachers we're our own bosses, kind of. That there's things we have to do, but really our day-to-day, we're pretty much in charge of ourselves, which is kind of nice. And a lot of other professions may not have that.
Yes.
Especially if it's like results driven, like, oh, you gotta make sales, or you gotta, I don't know what the real world's like. So, whatever analogy fits for you, use it.
Right. But that's why I thought for the longest, I'm like, well, for-profit schools. But then I think about charter schools, and then you think about it, leaving politics out, just thinking about like when they talk about Betsy DeVos as the education secretary and how they've monetized charter schools, but they use public funds. And I'm like, there has to be a way, because that's how people class value from what you produce, is if you can show there's something produced and it has a value. Because you take kids for 13 years and they still might not be worth anything until like they're 50.
Yeah. And well, it's funny, people, are upset that, charter schools get public money and all this stuff, but it's not a whole lot different than an analogy you could kind of draw is when, a billionaire NFL team owner says, hey, city, I need you to pay to build me this stadium.
Right.
And the city says, well, what if we don't? Well, then I'll go somewhere else.
Yep.
Oh, well, here's $700 million. Don't worry, the taxpayers. It's going to be good for job growth and all this. And there's some of that, but
in general, no.
It doesn't. No one else, it's funny, and this is a totally different, podcast, but it's a heck of a lot easier to stay rich than it is to stop being poor, even though the dollar amount, it's a hell of a lot harder to go from 20 grand a year to 40 grand a year than it is to go from 20 million a year to 40 million a year. Right.
Exactly.
it's momentum, I guess. I don't know.
It's because it's again, like you said, it's another podcast. It's classism. I'm a fervent believer that classism plays a significant role. It plays a role in this professional thing as well. But I won't go into the classism thing. But I agree with you on that. So
for example, like you being an African American male are wildly underrepresented in our profession, right?
Yes.
Short.
It's interesting.
The numbers are staggeringly small, and that's.
And there's 2 reasons for that. There's 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is when people choose quote unquote majors in college, they think about money. So the first thing is like, well, can I make money? And I'm being honest, as a black man, do I want to do something where I'm not going to make money and I'm already behind the 8 ball for making money? So I need to do something that makes me money, number 1. But number 2, you look at it and you're like, man, why would I want to go into a profession where I don't see myself, number 1, but number 2, that I may not be respected, because then that professional thing comes in. And when you see black teachers, male or female, they male specifically, they tend to be coaches, or they tend to do something where they can find a way to be an authority figure, because otherwise it's really no point, just in a general statement, but not totally true. There's no point in being there. Like in my first school that I taught at for a little while, I was the only black male teacher in the entire school. The only other black man in the school was the janitor. Like, I mean, that was the representation in the school.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think. So again, I don't know my new school as well as I'd like to, but it's off the top of my head, the only black male I can think of right now is a PE teacher / basketball coach. And I'm sure there's somebody I'm forgetting, and that makes me a jerk. And that's, again, I don't know everybody yet. The dude next door to me at my old school, social studies guy, he was a black dude. But we had a PE teacher. Yeah, that's about it. Like it's, and again, yeah, like you said, and people don't tend to, it's funny, people tend to respect you based on your paycheck, right? Not on what you do.
Right.
Because if I said, hey, I'm in construction, people go, oh, okay. And they're like, oh, you're the guy who's, I've seen your name all over the place. Like you build entire developments. Yeah. Oh, okay. How's that any different than just the laborer swinging the hammer? You know what I mean? It's the same job.
Yes, it is.
The paycheck changes.
But it goes with class. And so I think that's the level of classism that exists, because it's weird. So I look at that, and so I think, well, what is the solution? If we want teachers to be classed as professionals, what are steps to change the public narrative of that? But two, do we want to change the public narrative of that?
So I guess a lot of people say, teachers would say, of course I want to be treated like a professional. And then, but if somebody said, well, so if you don't have very good results, we should get rid of you. They'd be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Well, yeah. I mean, that's kind of what it is, right? I mean, it's most professionals are in something resembling a results-driven business.
Right.
And so, like, if you're an accountant and you mismanage somebody's money, you're gone. Whereas if you're a teacher and you do a trash job for a semester, you just get to try it again, right?
Right. So I mean, it feels like there's an accountability standard that needs to be maybe more stringent. I
mean, I'd be cool with that. Yeah, man, that would be the best. I'd really be into that.
But then it lends itself to the next level of, well, then you have to have professional development that is on par to keep teachers up to date. But it also means that the resources teachers have to also be up to date. And so we look at it, does a doctor have second-rate stuff? I don't think so. So at that point, you're like, well, how do you support the teacher actually going forward? Or is this something that the teacher has to do on their own dime?
Right. Well, and here's the thing, like, if they said, hey, you've got to pay for your professional development, but we're going to start compensating teachers differently. And you know what? You're probably going to see a 30% increase in your pay. Sign me up. Right. I'm cool with that.
And so maybe that because and the funny thing is this, just looking at it from a state level, because I follow the politics that goes on in North Carolina about paying teachers and the narrative that they put out there, because they use funny statistics and accounting to say we've increased teacher pay XYZ because of sort of bloated numbers. And it's weird because at that point, it's like I feel like do you think there's a shortage of teachers?
There will be, I think, simply because there's been, well, it's already showing up in universities, right? The enrollment in those programs is way down,
right?
And part of it, just as an example, and I'm approaching this, and I've kind of played the optimist or the idiot or both. I don't know yet. Thinking like, all right, I know it's, you see something bad happen, you're like, all right, eventually it will get better. And so just as an example, when you hit year 15 in North Carolina, you're halfway through your career, right? 30 years is retirement. you in theory, you essentially, once you finish year 15, you've maxed out your salary.
Right. Yes.
Which to me, that to me is the insult. It's not the low pay. It's the insult of, you're going to do a job for 15 more years and we're not going to pay you a dime more. Whereas no one else, like if you worked for, Bank of America or Wells Fargo, whoever, like, a lot of banks around here in Charlotte. And they said, we're going to pay you great, but after year 15, we're going to freeze it. You get laughed out of the room, right?
Right. You'd have no employees.
full transparency. You technically at year 25 do get one $2,000 raise. So it's not technically completely stagnant. You get one pay bump and then it stays frozen. So you technically go 10 years with no pay bump. You get a $2,000 raise and then it freezes forever, no matter what, in perpetuity, until you decide to quit or put a gun in your mouth. I don't know.
But it's funny because I think, because I didn't know that, because obviously I didn't stay in North Carolina long enough for that. But I think that's where maybe the solution is with professional development. At year 15, you start having incentivized things for the year 15 people. So at that mark, you have to do X, Y, and Z, so you can start receiving pay increases, and the pay increases you receive are based on your efforts. And I think at that point, if I'm 15 years in and I'm not doing professional development to get better, then I don't deserve, well, not deserve, because I think that's a bad word, but I shouldn't be in this profession anyway. So maybe that's a way where they do that, because I know they tried to quote use master's degrees and national boards as mechanisms to make people, or to make it more attractive to existing teachers. But I don't know if those things are.
So, I mean, it's economics, right? People respond to incentives. That's everything. And they took away, master's pay went away. If you were grandfathered in, you got it. But so then at that point you say, all right, what's my incentive? So in theory, right, a master's degree helps you become a more effective educator, because you learn new stuff, you learn new practices, you grow in your profession. And so you, again, in theory, become more efficient. National board, I have not done my master's degree. Most of it's cost prohibitive. Yes. Right. It's a 10% pay increase, which is nice, but it would take me several years to pay off. And between that and coaching 2 sports, and that would be the other thing too. Like, I do receive a stipend for coaching. It's not a lot, but it's not nothing.
Right.
And so if I'm doing my master's, I don't coach for that semester. So really, actually, my pay decreases for that year. And I've got to pay. I can't be like, hey guys, once I get this, that tuition's coming, don't worry. And it's not impossible, but it's difficult, right? And national board it costs money as well. But national board, ironically, costs less than a master's, and actually gives it's a 2% higher pay bump. I will, like I said, I applied for my national board, and I've written the papers and taken the tests. And if anyone's listening, pass me. But I won't find out until December if I got it. But it's, I can tell you right now, I did gain some stuff from it, and it does help you kind of reflect on your practice and think about things that you could do better, which is helpful. But if I'm being completely honest, like, I'm not, maybe it's the way I'm wired, but I'm not, like, I'm busy enough as it is. Like, I do try to revisit my practice. All right, this lesson worked, I'll use it, or it didn't work, I could tweak it, but not to the level I had to do for national board. And if there wasn't a pay increase involved, I'm not doing that to the level I did. I'm just not, because there's not an incentive to do so outside of altruism and me saying I want to be a better teacher for these kids. But altruism, again, it's not many people are wired that way.
And a question that comes from that is, so getting a master's degree or national board, does it give you mobility? Because whenever people gain new certifications or they advance themselves in careers, it makes them more attractive to other things, to other avenues, and it should open more doors. But if you get a master's degree as a teacher, normally the master's degree is about the teaching. So does that make you mobile? Whereas I feel pretty certain if you get national board certified, at least it gives you the mobility, in a sense, to go to other states, because obviously state to state they have their own education systems, and so you have to have licensing through their states. Whereas national board actually helps you circumvent a little bit of the minutia you have to go through. But does having a master's degree, is it worth the money? Does it give you the mobility?
Well, so it's I'd argue that neither really gives you mobility, because no matter what, it could be a pay bump state to state, but cost of living could be different. It's a lateral move. There aren't promotions, right? If you get a master's and you have to do it separately, you have to do it in administration if you want to go into that,
Right.
And you can make some more money there, but it's a different job, and it's one I've considered, but I don't know. I think I'd miss the classroom. I think I'd miss the classroom a lot, because I'm not the guy that can, and I'm not saying administrators only do this, but that, like, I'm not the guy sitting in the office doing paperwork, and that's kind of what administrating is. And I mean, you've got to develop relationships with your employees and with the kids, but it's not the same thing.
Especially on the first level of it too, because I have a friend who just went in administration this year, and he said it's different, man. Like, he used to be the varsity soccer coach, the teacher, and now he's an admin, and he's like, man, it's different.
Yeah. And ironically, you know, I've spent my whole career in high schools, and I talked about how, like, you know, I don't even know that I could drop down to a middle school and be sane.
It's hard.
But yeah. And elementary, I definitely couldn't do. But if you're an administrator, you know, you're K-12 there, and they're probably going to, you know, in a lot of school systems, if you're a new administrator, they automatically say, hey, you're going to elementary school.
Yep.
And the reason for, I guess, it's, as far as like hours are concerned, I'm guessing elementary is a little bit lighter, simply because there aren't the same extracurriculars.
Right.
So it gives you an opportunity to focus a little more on the job, which I think is smart. Actually, North Carolina only recently fixed it to where they made sure that, you know, going from the classroom to an administrator was not a pay cut. For some people, it used to be, and obviously that's a disincentive.
Yes, it is.
Which again, congratulations on your promotion. Will you hand back some of that money, please?
The system in itself is just it for a country that prides itself in capitalism. It's weird, but it also actually, if people think about it, it actually makes the whole fear of socialism, I guess, a case study. Now that I think about it, no one's ever used like public education as a sort of a bang against, you know, the equals of people.
Yeah. You know, for people that say, oh, we can't be socialists, like, I've got bad news for you. We already are.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We're not. I mean, look at, you know, education, military, roads, the post office. Like, it's all technically socialist, right? And these are things that really, for the return you get on the dollar, are really pretty good. People love to talk about if government was run like a business, they could never do that. You know, this, which is obviously, you know what, you're right. Government's not run like a business, because I get paid more if it was.
Right.
But also, like, oh, businesses can't go into debt. Really? You know, governments that's how most businesses start. And a lot of them have to go around and beg, like you think of the tech industry, they all have to beg venture capitalists for money
all the time.
Yeah, they're laying themselves at the feet of VCs and saying, please, God, like, I'll give you 10% of my. It's Shark Tank, right?
All the time.
Yeah, and so, and I'm guessing you probably have a little bit of experience with that, with some of the stuff that you've kind of branched out into.
Yeah, man. Looking for money is very interesting.
Yeah, and it's funny, because most of the people that harp against, you know, education spending and saying, you know, we've got to worry about business and it shouldn't be run like a business, all this kind of stuff, then make decisions on education that would be completely, like, antithetical to how you would run a business.
Right. Well, one of the things that has been another thing outside of trying to have for-profit schools, which I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but I think it's worth investigating. Another thing is the calendar. The calendar that schools function on are absolutely inadequate. I remember showing this every year at the beginning of the school year. I would show students a year-long calendar. Either would be from Wake County or somewhere in California where they use the year-long calendar. The first reason I would say that it makes sense is, one, we're not an agrarian society anymore. People don't farm and send their kids to collect the crops at certain times in the year. But the second thing is it's actual efficient use of the facilities. It's about in my opinion, it's about the use of the facilities and the ability to reduce class size and actually use your workforce better. Because if the school is used year round, literally year round, then you can actually lessen the workloads of teachers, and you can actually hire more teachers, and you can actually make class sizes smaller. And what you do is, if we think about it, we trained children for 13 years that you always have your summer free. And then they go to college. And that first summer they're free, they literally don't know what to do because they're adults. And then I don't know if they're similar to me, but for me, every year after my freshman year of college, I went to summer school because I'm like, hey, man, I need to finish this. Like it wasn't about like, well, let me just fart around for the summer. It was like, I need to finish it. So I'm like, if you efficiently use the school and not use summer school as a sort of a punishment, but have it fixed where if a kid needs to be remediated to one thing, make them be remediated in sort of a different way.
Right. And the other thing too, if you want to talk about, results, there's a brain drain, right? That's what they call it, the brain drain every summer. Like,
every summer, God,
because it's the kids who need public education the most that suffer the most from it, because they're not encouraged to read at home. Right. And they
don't eat during the summer.
Also that. Yeah. And that's the other thing too. If a kid that's another service that people, forget that schools provide, to kids. Really, if it's 180 school days, and they get breakfast and that's 360 meals that for some of these kids, they're not getting. And if a kid is hungry, why do they care about their math homework? They don't, and they shouldn't.
And in addition to that, it also, you can actually provide incentives along the way or you can give the option, okay, you can have the summer off, or we're going to continue and we're going to start semester 5 and let kids who want to continue or finish school earlier do that. But another thing is, and this is a statistic I looked up, teen pregnancy rates are significantly higher because of that 2.5 months that they have free, because they don't know what to do. And I surveyed every year a significant number of students. I taught about 120 to one semester, 120 next semester. So about 250 in kids, 240, 250 in kids. Hey man, how long are in your summer break before you're bored? And literally the consensus is 3 to 6 weeks. They're done after 3 weeks. They want to come back. They want to come back. Like, that's their life. So why wouldn't you? And teachers, what do teachers do? Like, I literally go crazy having that much free time off. Number one, because people think you're paid during the summer. If you set your accounting up right, you can be paid during the summer, but you have to take less during the actual teaching time.
Correct.
But
that's what I do. Yeah.
Right. But the second level is I have to pay for my life then. There's no structure there anymore. And then who wants to hire me for that time unless I run my own business? So then I'm really just like farting around, and unless you have it set up for them to do professional development, which again, it'd be a way to improve the lifestyle and professional growth and development of teachers, is to use that time to actually make them do something. And I say make as an incentive, like, hey, you do this, we pay you this. I think that matters.
Yeah, I can't really. Christmas break is the closest thing I have, because I get 2 weeks and even though like I'll have plans, because since I coach football, I'm there all summer. Right. And thankfully, I guess, for that too, because I think I would get bored. There's only so much you can do, because again, you can't just be like, oh, well, I'm going to go to the beach for a month. Like, that doesn't happen. Like, that's not,
you can't pay for it.
Right. Right. And so I would love a year-round calendar. And I don't know, I haven't looked at it real closely because they don't care what I think. But, was it like even if it's like 9 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or 10 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or whatever it is, and kind of do it that way, I think that's a great way to kind of, or or 9 on, 2 off, 9 on, 2 off. That's the end of a semester. And that puts you at what, 22 weeks?
Yep. And that's half the year.
Pretty much.
Well, and that was my proposal as well, is because also another study showed, because I've done my research on it, is that kids, there's a fatigue that comes. So you have brain drain in the summer, but you have also classroom fatigue after 9 weeks. So after that semester, the kids want a break. So give them 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks off. Let their parents figure that out. And part of the reason that they do continue the summer thing is for industry. And industry wanted summer industries and stuff like that. But I'm like, if these summer industries are intelligent, would you prefer to make all your money at one time, which some may say yes, or would you like to make it 3 or 4 times in a year, which means that you can actually have consistent annual flow? And in my opinion, would say, hey, I want to have, if I can run my business for 3 weeks every 9 weeks, or 3 weeks for every 9 weeks quarterly, then I'm making money quarterly. I feel like that way you could actually do things cater to seasons as well too. And that changes the dynamic where, again, if there's professional respect for it, I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you know, you're familiar, and anybody listening may not be, that the North Carolina General Assembly was kind of altered the statewide calendar a while ago because the tourist lobby, you know, went to the General Assembly and said, hey, like, people aren't going to the beach. Part of it is because we were still in a recession, but let's ignore that.
Right.
And so they said, people aren't going to the beach. We need to move when, you know, school ending at the, you know, around like Memorial Day doesn't work for us. We got to bump it back a couple weeks. We got to end it in mid-June. And the General Assembly said, oh, for businesses, no problem. Right. And so now, you know, we get out mid-June, we go back at pretty much the end of August. Which it's wild, you know, as a football coach, our first Friday back is often our third game of the season.
Yep. Yep.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And because, and not like you said, parents will figure it out. Like, I really would love to see you, like, people are adaptable, right? And so it's not, if they say, oh man, summer goes from May to early August. Well, we can't go to the beach this year, kids. Like, that is, you know, it doesn't make sense.
Zero sense.
You know the rules. We can only go to the beach from August 10th to 17th. Like, that's so it doesn't make sense. They've started to give. I think actually North Carolina is one of 2 states in the union that don't. And it's possible I'm wrong on this, but I remember hearing something along the lines of that we're one of the only 2 states in the union that like local districts don't have the autonomy to kind of decide how they're going to do it. They can't start before a certain date. Like, they just can't.
Right.
Sorry, that's just how it is. And to me, that's insane. I don't get that at all. Especially when you talk about we're not agrarian anymore. We'll say there are some districts that are very, like, they're in Iowa and they farm corn. Okay, so let them have a long summer break if they need it. Or kind of, you know, if it's year round, put their little 3-week break around where, but farming's mostly mechanized now, so it's not like, oh, we need all hands on deck. Work it around to when, you know, harvest time would be. Okay, like, why can't we do that?
And see, this is why it leads to, like, the ultimate final question is, I think the reason that it's not deemed professional is because they don't produce anything. So teachers in general, I feel like, have to find a way or use what they have to make money and bring a prestige to it. So and I think that's the reason why it's not really seen, because doctors can be seen as people who make money, accountants, lawyers, those people who seem to make money. So I give you the final say on it. Like, in your opinion, ultimate question, do you think teachers are professionals? If yes, then how do they magnify that or project it so the world begins to accept it? And if no, what can they do to have it seen or for themselves internally to make it be seen that they are professional?
So, yeah, you and I were kind of texting back and forth, and I'm on both sides of the fence on this. But I think, again, if I have to choose a side, and obviously biased because I'm a teacher, but I say yes, we are, and the reason being is because it is very, like, it's trained labor. Even if we don't necessarily produce new products, we do take, in theory, we're part of the system that takes the blank slate that is a student and gives them skills and knowledge to prepare them to be, not necessarily to have a job in the real world, but to be able to be trained.
Right.
And there's a requisite amount of education. There's professional licensure. There's a code of ethics within the profession that if you don't adhere to that, you no longer get to be a part of the profession. Right.
Right.
And to answer your question, as far as, like, I do think, again, there's, like I mentioned earlier, there's a gap, because society would, I think, again, if you surveyed 100 people, people would say, yeah, teachers are professionals. But then it's the compensation. Again, the way that we're compensated is the biggest argument, I think, for no. Simply because they say, no, here's how long have you been doing it? Here's your paycheck. Doesn't matter, good or bad. Here's what you get. You could be the LeBron James of teaching, right? And somebody say, wow, you're the second greatest teacher of all time. For all you LeBron fans. And you're the second greatest teacher of all time, and you get paid the same as the Frank Kaminsky of teaching. Take that, Frank.
Solid analogy, sir.
Stop getting pushed off the block by guards. A lot of hate for Frank. I'm sure he's a nice guy, and I'm sure he's listening. So, and so I think that's the big. I say yes, we're professionals. How do we? The other part of your question: how do we go about being viewed as professionals? We're seen as professionals, and I have people, and I don't know if they're being polite. As us Southerners, right? We're polite people. In theory, and they say, "Oh, I one of the most common things I get is, "Oh, I couldn't do what you do." And I'm like, "Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could. Like with the if you had trained the same way I had, you probably could. And there would be parts of it that you might be better than me at, and there's going to be parts that I'm better than you at, and it is what it is. But again, that's any profession, I think. And the same way, like med school is harder than, like, getting a degree in education. No question. Like, yes. I don't think anybody's going to argue that. But I think there are plenty of people that, if like cost and time weren't a problem, and they said, oh, I wanted to train to be a doctor instead of a teacher, like, those people exist.
I agree.
Right. And so now that only works one way. I think if you were able to become a medical doctor, you could obtain a degree in education. Would you be a good teacher? I don't know. Like we talked about, like all our college professors, I was pretty fortunate that through my scholarship program, I got priority registration. So I was able to kind of mostly pick and choose my classes and my professors. So, I had friends that had horror stories about just awful professors, and I didn't, for the most part, didn't run into that. I was pretty fortunate that I had professors who were also good teachers. But I heard plenty of stories about, people that, they wrote the textbook and they know everything about it, but they can't convey that information. It's a difference. It's like coaches and players, right?
Yes.
It's two totally the same way that, like, the CEO of McDonald's, if you drop him in on the make line during the middle of like a lunch rush, he's in trouble probably. Right.
Or if you're going to be local, Michael Jordan can get on the court and lace him up and do great on the floor, but put him in the CEO's office and, well, yeah. Well, I had to bring the sports thing back in there because
Oh, listen, it's man, what a painful truth. It hurts so bad. I can't tell you how many text messages that me and buddies have had in the group chat about, dissertations written about how to fix the Hornets. Oh man, those lovable bumbling Hornets. But yeah, so I don't know that, and I don't know that there is, if there was a way to make people all of a sudden go, hey, you guys are professionals. We see you as professionals. We want to pay you like professionals. If I knew the answer to that question, I'd have done it already. But because I think it's one of those things that people just kind of accept school for what it is because they went through it. Their kids are going to go through it. And then here's our system. How it is. It's very hard to, in a country as big as ours, with as many people as ours, with as many bureaucracies as ours, to say, all right, here's the thing that we're going to change, and that's going to make it better for everyone. Like, that panacea just doesn't exist. So a little more, local control, maybe, especially with the calendar, is a big one, because people in if you're an ice farmer in Alaska, you've got different needs than if or whatever it is they farm, then somebody's growing up in like Silicon Valley, right?
Right.
And so I don't think there's a way to just, because if you just said, all right, fine, we're going to have this massive overhaul. Like, all right, if I'm running for president and I say, all right, we're going to double every teacher's salary, which federal officials can't do that, but here or there. And well, people say, well, what about the results? I do think, from the bottom of my heart, I fully and truly believe that within a generation, you would have a wildly better education system.
Well,
now
I think that's fair.
You wouldn't immediately, because if you double someone's pay and they're the same person, they don't automatically become twice as good. But if you pay a legitimately competitive rate, it becomes more difficult to get that. You have more talent going into that job. And then all of a sudden, again, it would take a generation, and you'd have to weed out some of the bad, and you're always going to have bad. And people that say like, oh, there's so much waste in government, businesses would never do that. That's BS. I know plenty of people that work in, the private sector that, they fly out and they stay in a hotel and they have, for work, and, two people go there, they both get their own hotel room. They don't double up. They don't, they both have $100 per diem. They both get their own rental car. Like, there's waste, right? Now they're profit driven and they're allowed to, that's their company. They can run it that way. That's fine. But to pretend that waste doesn't exist is absurdity. And so that's why, to me, like, for-profit schools, I don't know how you do it for profit and say, hey, look, it's better, because the only people that can go to a for-profit school are going to usually come from your best and brightest. The same way people, oh, look how much better private schools are. I pay $25,000 a year, and look how many great, look how many Harvard graduates it turns out. Well, yeah, that's probably because their parents went there. Right? It's not
fair
apples.
Enough.
It's not apples to apples. The kid who's hoping that they can go to school that day because they get a meal. If you dropped in, like, here's a better analogy, right? The county I used to be in, there's a wildly affluent school, and on the other side of the county, you've got 90% free and reduced lunch. If you take the staff from each school and you switch them, the results don't follow, right?
No.
And so to me, that's the biggest argument about how do we decide to pay teachers, because really we are a quarter, a third tops of the input as to what that student turns into.
Yes.
It's parents, it's neighborhood, it's environment. It's, the family's the biggest one. And that's most of it. And that's what I'm saying. Like, we're a quarter to a third tops, with occasional exceptions where kids come from a crappy home life and they realize education can be their way out and they throw themselves into it. But for the average, for the middle, 90%, we're not the ones that make or break them.
That's a fair point. Very fair point.
Yeah, and so to pay us like we're 80% of it is ridiculous. I'll take it. If they're giving it out, I'll take it.
That's solid. That's solid, man. Well, I think the points that you made are super solid, and it basically says that education and the system of education is probably one of the greatest mysteries to be solved in the United States, maybe in the world.
And you just cut out.
Hello?
On you there?
Oh, I'm there. I'm still there.
Hold on just a second. I don't know why. All right, whatever. That was odd. It's anything, right? It can always improve, but I think we'd be doing ourselves a disservice in saying that it's bad. It's not a broken system. It could be improved like anything, but it's not broken. A lot of good gets done for a relatively inexpensive price.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you for your time, and I look forward to the next one we do, because sports obviously matters, is that you move on from professionals to professional athletes or future pseudo-professional athletes.
That's
so,
right. Yeah. I've enjoyed it, man. I look forward to it. And I tell you what else I look forward to is, you know what? It's a Tuesday afternoon. I've been home for 2 hours already. I'm enjoying my summer off, man. So there it is. That's how I get paid.
That's right. Thanks, Matt.
Take it easy, brother.
All right.